Hi, how are you today?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good. Thank you so much for speaking with me.
Thank you for speaking with me.
No problem. Let's talk the movie. So my first question for you is how did you get involved in it?
Actually, really cool story. I had like a really shitty 2 years. I got in a car accident that like took me out for about a year. I broke both my femurs and it was just like a disaster. And then shortly after that, my dad passed away from cancer. So I kind of just was like in a dark place
Yeah.
and didn't really know if I wanted to do it anymore. My dad was like a huge supporter of me. He was actually the reason I even started like modeling and even like thought
Mm.
about acting. So when I lost him, I went into just a hole and I was pushing people away from me, kind of like what Jax does in the film, and just didn't want to let anyone close because I didn't want to feel that loss again. And I remember talking with my agents at WME, and I wasn't really getting auditions, but I also wasn't feeling my best. I was basically throwing my life away because I was just mad at the world. And I hadn't gotten any auditions in a long time, and I didn't really feel like they believed in me or
Mhm.
there was that kind of camaraderie that you need with a team. So we went back and forth, and finally I was just like, you know what, this isn't right. We separated ways, and then I met with a few agents, like agencies, and there was like I think 2 or 3 responses that was like, the passion's just not really there as a team. Like
Mhm.
saying no, they didn't want to rep me. And I was like, man, like, okay, that kind
The
of really
losses
lit a
keep
fire under me.
coming.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, I see how it is. I see how it is. You don't believe in me. And that kind of lit a fire under me where I wanted to prove people wrong. I knew I was talented. I knew that I had the work ethic that it took to get to where I wanted to be. But, people didn't take the time to see what happened. They didn't care to have a conversation and be like, oh, why haven't you worked in 2 years? I got
Mhm.
to buy a car. My dad died. I had to go home and take care of him because he had cancer. They didn't care to ask me those questions. So it's not even someone I wanted to be on my team. And I remember it was like a few days after I got the email from one of the talent agencies that said they weren't passionate about me.
Mhm.
And I was like, really, I was hurt, but I was more so like gassed up, like I was ready to go. And I got an email through my Instagram from the casting director for Perfect Addiction, Nancy Nair. And I got the audition through just a random email. And I was like, this is it. I read it. And I was like, I'm booking this and I'm going to prove everybody wrong. And I'm going to show them that they should have had the conversation with me to figure out why I
Yeah.
wasn't working. And I got it. And it was just like, man, the weight off my shoulders just felt so great. But then it was like I lifted off the sandbag and then someone else just threw another one on because I knew I had to perform. And
Mhm.
the role was very demanding physically. And I had just gotten out of a really bad accident where I had tons of broken bones and torn ligaments and all this stuff. So that was probably the most physically demanding and scary part of it was like, is my body going to be able to do it? But yeah, it was a interesting story. So when I got that audition tape, I was just like, I'm locking this in. I got on a director's call with Castillo. She overheard my story and she was like, you're perfect for this.
Yeah.
So it worked out.
Well, it's insane to know that you had all of these hits to you, and then you land this role, and it's a role that is not only physically demanding, but also mentally demanding. You're going in and you have such intense scenes, and whether it's you're in the ring fighting or you're having a back and forth with Sienna or with another character, but it's for me, it's so mind-boggling how you pulled that off. But I want to talk about that. So when you went in to do the physical training for it, even the mental training for it, what was your mantra trying to keep you going through all of this?
I think for the physical aspect of it, I have a like, I'm gonna go until I'm dead type of mentality. Like you got to kill me. And that was like the driving factor where it was like, I'm not going to let my injuries limit me. I'm not going to let, whatever doctors tell me about this, that, and the other. I'm just going to keep pushing. I know what my body's limits are, and I'm going to try and do the best that I can and bring
Mhm.
the most authentic performance to the screen physically. But emotionally, I just feel like I was on that revenge path to,
Mhm.
ultimately prove so many people wrong that didn't believe in me that every opportunity I got on camera, I was just like, okay, this is your moment to shine. This is your time to, leave a legacy behind to where people can see and, acknowledge what you're capable of. And that was just always in the back of my head. And it was just always one of those things that was a driving force. So I didn't really need to pull for much mentally, especially because I had gone through so many struggles that I was like, there's nothing worse than losing a parent, and there's nothing worse than really getting hit by a car. So,
Yes. Yeah.
so I was like, I the mental aspect of it, I had already calloused my mind, and I was on like a David Goggins mindset. But as far as like your body, it was struggling. I was definitely going through it. I mean, before the fight scenes, when we first got there, the first 2 weeks of filming was all the choreographed routines and all the fight stuff. And on top of it, we were in an abandoned warehouse that was freezing cold, and there was no heat. The windows were busted out. The floor was filthy, and it was like 16, 17-hour days. So that was like really demanding. I mean, I was getting like cortisone shots. I was taking like the pain pills. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. But once I was done with the first 2 weeks and there was no more fight stuff, I was just like, oh,
everything looks natural. I think that's kudos to you, and it's a huge payoff that those 2 weeks, but also the prep prior to arriving.
Yeah. I had a lot of great coaches. Daniel Moreno was one of them. He was the Brazilian jiu-jitsu coach that I worked with in El Segundo. Keith Davis, he was our stunt coordinator. David Wilno, Robert Brechek, like these were all guys that really, lived this athletic, but also, demanding life within film. Robert Brechek was my stunt double, and he was a top 6 MMA fighter in Poland. So I got to work with someone who was actually an MMA fighter. I got to see how he trained. I got to get into the mindset of what he does preparing for fights. So that helped me bring a lot of authenticity to the camera for sure.
Are you more of a MMA fighter, fan now than you were, or are you still kind of like, I'll leave it to the pros?
You see, I never actually watched any of it before. It wasn't that I would turn it down. Like if it was on, I'd be like, oh, I'm into it. I'm a sports fan just in general. So if there's games on, I'm going to watch them. But I can honestly say that basketball was my life. That's all I really cared about, played, wanted to be professional at. And now I won't miss a UFC fight. I won't. And it's pretty crazy because I never watched it before. But once I got the film, I had to watch it. And I was watching reruns of different fights. And my character, they really wanted me to kind of embody McGregor. And that was kind of the essence of who they wanted Jax to be. So I was just watching tons of interviews with, Conor McGregor and all his fights, and how dominant but also impactful he was on the UFC, and how he made the UFC pretty much what it is today and the big platform that it has. So I think that charisma is what I wanted to bring to the camera, because ultimately Jax is an asshole. And like, I want the fans at the end to still like me somewhat. So that was the most challenging aspect, was to be like, all right, how can I be captivating and this like force, but ultimately have people at the end being like, oh, I kind of like want to see that guy do good.
Yes. You pulled it off, because I finished the movie and I was like, this could have gone either way for me. Like I was like, she could have ended up like with one guy, but then I was like, this could have worked with your character. I think even though they show him as the villain, his whole point, you see this with every single, sport, is he's there to make everyone better. You want to be that guy, so you're bringing out the competition, but he has the hardest job of them all, to stay at the top. It's always the hardest to stay it. And you're watching your character attempt that in this movie. And so you have to respect that. And you see that. And yes, you're, as I said, supposed to be the villain, but there is respect there, because you look at that and you're like, that's what everyone wants to be.
Yeah, I appreciate you looking at it that way, because obviously his personal flaws were within his relationship. And that was what you ultimately want to hate him for. It's because he's an asshole in his relationship. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to the fighting aspect of it, or as Jax is the champion, it's hard to be at the top. It's definitely something that, everyone's coming for your spot. So you have that chip on your shoulder. And Jax, when I spoke with Castile about his past, he had an abusive relationship with his father. His father was a drunk, and like, she kind of spun it to me where he's had such a hard life that he's not really willing to let anyone love him. And when someone does get close, which, Sienna ultimately was the one who really got in and was with him for 3 years and was able to do that. He finally gets to the point where he's like, I gotta fuck this up, because I can't have her hurt me or leave me. So now we need another one. Yeah.
Now we need another story so we can see that person who finally gets
Right.
through
I
as a
think, and that's
character.
the interesting part at the end where you know, I come in and I'm like, do you think, you know, there's a chance for me to be redeemed?
Yeah.
And you know, she's like, I wouldn't put my money on it. But I think they set that up, you know, they set it up to where it's like, oh, I mean, we could see Jax redeemed. We don't know.
Yeah, but the audience wants to put their money on it. That's the key.
Which is
She
what we
might
want.
not.
Which
Yeah,
is what
but
we
the
want.
audience
Exactly.
is it. So had you read the book during filming previous to this, or you just kind of stayed away and let yourself, you know, work with the writers and all them to craft the character?
Yeah, I spoke with Claudia, and when I first got to meet her, you know, I congratulated her obviously because she wrote the book when she was like 14 years old, which is crazy. And I think that when I spoke with Castile, she kind of spun it to where it was like the book, but there was going to be so many different aspects of it that she kind of wanted me to bring my authenticity to it. So I didn't go and read the book. I just read the script like 5 times. I just kept reading it and reading it and reading it and trying to understand why Jax would do what he did, because there were probably like 4 different scenes where I was like, how in the world am I going to deliver this line and have anyone want to see another movie with me?
Yeah.
Like, it's just nearly impossible. And I kept coming back to Castile and I was like, are you sure this is going to work? And she's like, no, trust me. I know you can do it. And I think that was what was a big struggle of mine. I was like, I need the audience to want to see more at the end, but I also need to be, you know, as authentic in delivering these, you know, gut blows as I can. And I hope I did it justice.
Well, for my final question for you today, what are you hoping fans get for the movie?
I hope that fans get whatever happens in your life situation, there's always a chance to make up for it. And no matter how many times you get knocked down, and it's very cliche, but I think for me, you know, leading into this, I had been beaten to the ground. And like, maybe I didn't look as if, except for when I got hit by the car, that I looked like I got beaten to the ground. I looked like I got hit by a car. But like emotionally, some people can put on a really good front to where you just don't know what's going on in their life and they could just be dying inside. And I think that's the ultimate story with Sienna, is like, you know, she puts on this tough act and she's there and she's trying to, you know, cater to so many other people's lives instead of her own. And she's missing that part of herself to where it's like, okay, it's time to focus on me. And had she not gone through all of those things and giving to others and trying to do this and trying to set this up, she wouldn't have found that part of her. So I think we all go through our times, and whether we want to listen or not, maybe our friends know better. You know, there's times where, you know, my dad or someone that I know close to me would be like, look, I told you. And I'm like, yeah, you did, but I didn't listen. And maybe if I did listen, I wouldn't have learned what I learned. So I think what you can take from this film on all ends is like, no matter how dark your past is, you can find the light at the end of the tunnel and ultimately make the best of it. Because what we do with today is what ultimately affects our future, not what we did yesterday or, you know, the week before or the month before.
Perfect. What a great answer. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today. And I'm super
Thank you.
excited for everyone to see the movie.
Yeah, thanks for watching. I appreciate it and taking the time today.